So our final presenter this afternoon is Bea Dawson. Bea is a Wellington-based author, columnist, public speaker, social and oral historian. Her no less than 18 books include Lady Painters, The Flower Painters of Early New Zealand, A History of Gardening in New Zealand Military Aviation Histories, Family and Farm Histories, including The Plimmer Legacy, which was published in May of this year. Before a family adventure set her on the course of becoming a writer, Bea was a psychologist in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. I have been particularly keen to hear Bea's presentation ever since I read the title, God, Guns and Gardening. Please welcome Bea.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Now that's working. Everybody can hear me, I hope, I trust. Very good. So firstly, it's lovely to see you all here. It's a great honour to be asked to speak to the Australian Garden History Society, which I've been thinking about joining for years. And now that I've got an article in one of your beautiful magazines and speaking to you, I thought that it was the decent thing to join. So I'm delighted to have joined, and I'm very excited actually just after afternoon tea, because I've found that among your number there's somebody who's almost a cousin of mine, which is pretty rare, Sarah Lucas. Thank you. It's very exciting to meet you. And I've only just started talking to people. So it's obviously there's many treats and not just horticultural and gardening ones to be had. So this is really a bit of an illustrated romp through the missionaries of early New Zealand. Now, this is the title page, and we're going to see a picture a bit like this again fairly soon. This is Rangi Hua Pa, and it's either called Hohi or OIHI, depending. I'm not quite sure which is the current spelling, but Hohi is easier to say, so we might stick with that. That's circa 1832, and I've got that there mostly because it's a beautiful picture to start with, but you'll see something fairly familiar soon, which I will talk to. Now, this is a great opportunity, of course, for some trans-Tasman connections. That's one of the reasons I chose this topic, because your very own Samuel Marsden, the one-time assistant chaplain at the penal colony at Port Jackson, may be known as the whipping parson. I'm not sure, and I'm not going into that. But by 1807, he was a significant landowner. And he was keen on God, he was keen on growing things. He grew a great variety of crops at Parramatta with the help of convict labour. And a major influence for him was the Church Missionary Society. Now, this is okay, it's not echoing. That's all right, it's echoing a bit for me, but it's all right. Now, the church, and actually we probably want to see what he looks like. I mean, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Samuel Marsden. Now, the Church Missionary Society, which began in London in 1799, that's when Anglicans decided the Christian gospel should be preached around the world. And Marsden thought, who better to do it but himself, and that he should take the gospel to New Zealand. Now, as a practical man of God, Marsden believed that when the missionary landed in a new field, if he held the cross in one hand, the axe should be in his left. So he was a man of theology, a man of passion and enthusiasm, a man of the Bible, but also he wanted to teach his missionaries and the people who worked in the mission stations good practical skills. And as part of his preparation for coming to New Zealand, he asked young Maori chiefs to work on his estate. That was to introduce them to European life. And one of them, Ruatara, invited him to set up a mission station in the Bay of Islands. And on the 22nd of December 1814, Marsden was on the mission ship Active. This is the first lot of missionaries that came to New Zealand. It sailed into the Bay of Islands with missionary Thomas Kendall, carpenter William Hall, shoe and rope maker John King, plus wives and convict labourers. And this is a picture, of course, of Samuel Marsden. He's the one with the distinctive figure here. And well, there's three missionaries I've mentioned. I'm not sure who the fourth one is, but I'm not sure who was more surprised, them at coming across and seeing the Maori chiefs, or the Maori chiefs at seeing these rather strangely dressed men turn up unheralded, no Twitter feeds, nothing on the internet to warn them, and turning up. And of course, here are some waiting out in the bay. Then shortly after they arrived, of course, Christmas Day was just 3 days later, and Marsden preached the first Christmas Day sermon. And shortly after that, he and his team of missionaries were on to sorting out the soil. They're preparing the soil for the seeds and vegetable roots they brought from Marsden's farm at Parramatta, so not so far from where some of you live. Now, this was very challenging, as the land was too steep and infertile. So if we go to this one. Now, you might think you saw that before on the first slide, and it was much the same, but we don't have a lot of scope for pictures from this era, so a little bit of repetition, particularly when they've swapped the rowing boat in the first one for a sailing ship on the second, so you actually might think you're seeing a different picture. But actually, it's, oops, we'll go back, probably. Sorry, I'm just getting the hang of this. But here, this was the Maori pa, and it looks beautifully neat and tidy, doesn't it? It looks as there's beautiful, neat gardens and fields. And this is the mission station. But actually, this was 1832. This was about the time that the mission station eventually got abandoned, some decades afterwards. It wasn't neat and tidy like that. It was too steep. It was infertile, and apart from that, the conditions were generally awful. It got down at the bottom. It got boggy. The missionaries squabbled. They drank. They indulged in a little local adultery. And by 1832, by the time the site was abandoned, there'd not been a single Christian conversion. Now, so this is from 1814 to 1832. But some of the missionaries had quite a good time, but it wasn't necessarily doing anything that the God of the time might have approved of. They had been promised a paradise, but the reality was it was anything but a paradise. But it was pretty obvious fairly early on that it wasn't going to work well. And so Marsden decided to set up another mission station. In fact, he set up several. And so what we're going to look at here is where the mission stations were. So he established his next one. Now his first one was they're all about here, the main ones. His second, and this is about where his first one was. It's not marked on the map, the one that was abandoned. This is Kerry. It was 1819. Pai here was a few years later, and some of you will have been to the Bay of Islands, know some are going. This is the wonderful area where you will go. I'm also going to be talking about Waimate, which is in the middle here, and then on the Hokianga Harbour to the left here. So it's easier to see here, actually. This is to show you where it is in relation to the North Island. And there are other mission stations at different places, but I'm only concerning myself with this area, Northland. So I'm about to move on to Kerry. Pai here is one of the main ones. Inland, Waimate, and then on Hokianga, and I've got a picture of the one at Paikanai. And so anything south of that isn't particularly relevant to today, but that'll give you an idea. So 15 mission stations were to be established in New Zealand, and they're largely in the north, as I said, but sprinkled down through the country. Now, Kerry. So once again, whoops, sorry. Kerry here, I'm talking about this one, 1819. When Marsden established this next mission station, he learnt from some of his mistakes. So he chose both the land and the superintendent very carefully. So rather than getting land which was very steep and almost impossible to grow anything on, he got land that was flat and fertile. And the Reverend John Butler had previously worked in London as a gardener. Well, the good news is it started very well. September the 28th, 1819, Marsden wrote in his diary, went to Caddy Caddy, which is how he said Kerry Kerry, went to Caddy Caddy to begin breaking up the land for cultivation. Our party, myself and 11 natives, began to clear ground for a garden and also to break it up with our hoes. The natives wrought exceedingly well, and by the night we had